Okay, these are the notes from week 1. We're talking about number sense, and so we have a couple of definitions that we need to discuss before we go on to some of the examples. Okay, so evaluate means to find an answer or to find a value. Least usually means smallest, greatest, largest, or biggest value. Whole numbers are numbers that don't have a fractional component, meaning that it's not fractions or decimals, it's numbers that are whole values. So numbers without fractions. So think of 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Integers are whole numbers that include the positive and the negative version. So it's all positive and negative whole numbers. Okay, and so we're going to move on to our examples. The square root of 7 is equal to, and so we're going to review back over using the calculator. Remember, to find the square root, we're going to take second and x squared because it has that root symbol above it. And we're going to type in 7, just press enter. And you see it gives you that same square root out, and that's because it's irrational, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But to change that to a decimal, you could press this double arrow key down here above enter, and you see it gives you 2.64, and it continues on. So it's non-repeating, non-terminating decimal, which means that it goes on forever. Our calculator has stopped it at the end of the screen here. So I'm just going to write the first few numbers, and then I'm going to put an ellipsis after showing that it continues. Okay, and so it is between blank and blank. So we're talking about what two whole values is it between. So it's between the number 2 and the number 3. Which value is it closer to? Is it closer to the 2 or is it closer to the 3? Because it's 2.6, that's greater than 2.5 or 2.5. So if it's greater than 2.5, it's going to be closer to 3. And so then to plot that on the number line, you would go in between the values of 2 and 3. This is about halfway, so you would go a little bit past that, and it's going to be closer to 3. And you could even label this the root of 7 in case you were doing multiple values on that line. For the next example, we have 2 pi. That can be read as 2 times pi also. So our calculator also has a pi button. So if you just multiply 2 times pi, you see it gives us that same value back, and that's because it is irrational. So to look at that decimal value, 6.283 and so on. So we're going to write down the first few values here with an ellipsis showing that it continues. It is between the values 6 and 7, but it's closer to 6 because it's less than 6.5. Okay, and so there's a problem with our number line here. It doesn't extend far enough, so I'm going to go ahead and extend it some more. We'll go ahead and write that it's a 7 over here. 6.5 is about here, so let's make it closer to 6 by going here. And so that would be our value for 2 pi, 6.283. Okay, so this next example takes a list of values and asks us to order them from least to greatest or smallest to biggest. Notice that this note on the side says evaluate as a decimal, so they want us to rewrite each value as a decimal first. We're going to line up those decimals here, and compare them to order them from least to greatest. Okay, so we're going to calculate each one of these. So 2 root 5, or 2 times the root of 5, can be typed in exactly as it looks. To get that decimal, press the arrow key, and you see it's 4.472. Okay, the root of 25 is actually 5. And that's because 5 times 5 is 25. That is the whole value, so 5.0. 5.2 is already a decimal, so I'm just going to copy that down. 2 pi we did earlier in our last example, 6.283. And the third root of 8, the third root is found a little differently. Type in the 3, second, and you see this arrow key up here above x squared, and you see it shrinks to a small 3, the index number 3 root, and then put that value 8 and just press enter, and you see it's 2. And that's because the third root of 8 is 2. When you reverse that, it's 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. And so the value for that is 2.0. All right, so now we're going to take each one of these and line them up. So 4.472, 5.0, 5.2, 6.283, and so on, and 2.0. All right, and we're going to order them least to greatest. We can start to sort through them by looking at that units place. 2 is the smallest value, which is actually equivalent to the cube root of 8. So we're going to rewrite that as its original value. Our next smallest value has a whole value of 4, so 4.472, which is actually 2 root 5. So we've got that one and that one taken care of. Then we have 2 whole values of 5 here. The smaller one is the one that has a 0 in the tenths place. So 5.0, which is the root of 25. Then 5.2 would be next, which was the original value. And our greatest value is 6.283, which was 2 pi. And that covers our notes for week 1.